This is the Waves of Innovation podcast, and I am DJ, your host. This time, I am talking to Jaime Jorge, who is the CEO of a company called Codacy, who offer tooling around code quality and security analysis. Jaime started life off as a software developer before going on to found Codacy and then become an investor and all those kind of cool things. So we talk a lot about the implications of agentic coding in software development more generally for software businesses, and of course the code quality and security implications of that. Sit back or stand up, depending on what you're doing whilst you're listening to this, and enjoy. Good afternoon, Jaime Jorge. I'm very proud of myself for having made some half decent attempt at pronouncing your name there. Thanks for joining me. Would you like to tell everyone who you are, what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Daniel, for having me. I'm Jaime. I'm CEO and co-founder of Codacy. Codacy is a platform that enforces quality, security, and AI compliance in the world of AI-generated code, which is the world we live in today. And so, quite happy to be here today.
Cool. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us. So just before we were recording, I was saying that literally yesterday, last night, I was having a conversation with an SRE on Slack who had had to look at an issue because there was an extremely large PR, like 5,000 lines introduced by a developer assisted with an agentic coding tool. And there's some concern about the kind of largeness of the PRs that are enabled by agentic coding tools and trying to keep on top of things like code quality and security vulnerability sneaking through all of that. So it's very much of the time that we need more tooling to help with that. So uh, what does Codacy offer in this space, and what kind of things have you been seeing from your customers?
An incredibly common and frequent observation that we're seeing in our customers and really across the industry. In fact, some research came out last year that showed that PR sizes have increased 150%, while review times increased almost 100%. And that's really because with AI, we're producing just 3 times more software with the help of agentic workflows. And so in this new world, the task at hand is how do we make sure that um, these massive pull requests that are now entering GitHub for us to review get actually reviewed. That people just don't click like looks, okay, merge, or worse even, use the same agent that produces the code to accept those pull requests. Um, how do we live in the world where there's so many new lines of code to review? And that's kind of been our obsession actually in our company. And so what we actually been focusing on is how do we enable people, teams, individual developers, but also managers to maintain ownership, maintain responsibility, accountability of software being produced, reviewing the AI generated uh, bits and pieces of code being produced by colleagues, by teammates, and just ensure quality and security. Another very interesting trend that you might see in Google Trends is the huge rise in code quality and code security because people now care about it more than ever before. And so we're building a number of very exciting features because of that. For example, the capability of leveraging all of the code analysis infrastructure that we've been building for the last 12 years to now put at the hands of an AI reviewer that does all of that legwork of code quality analysis. Like this is just one piece of the puzzle, but the point is there are fundamental questions that we as an industry are asking ourselves. What is code review in a world where review is no longer almost humanly feasible, right? What is security analysis where people don't have accountability or feel they don't have ownership truly or even understanding of the code they are producing and shipping, right? I actually interviewed an author of a book about AI compliance where he was introducing the idea of automation bias. W- h- What happens in the world where we believe AI is always correct and we just click accept? Well, if AI did it, maybe I could just accept it and move forward, right? And so these are fundamental questions, but as we've seen for our own company, they are opportunities to help teams and organizations ship safely while not losing any of the speed and efficiency they're hoping to get when they get these tools in place. Long
Yeah.
answer. I'm sorry, Daniel.
Long answers are absolutely fine. It reduces the amount of waffle that listeners have to endure me contributing to the conversation. I mean, it's slightly disheartening when you see on social media, on LinkedIn, folks who maybe haven't engaged with the tooling that's available, seeing this entirely as downside and not recognizing that there are opportunities for agentic tools to help improve the quality and kind of absence of vulnerabilities in software, and they're only thinking about the problem side of things. And then in my mind, there's kind of a couple of different approaches, right? There's all of the deterministic stuff that you've been working on for years and is arguably much quicker and more reliable than asking an agent, like, just, hey, look at this code. But then you've got the automated review and fix process as well, which presumably must be a lot easier. And now that instead of you folks having to write kind of old fashioned deterministic code to figure out how to patch things, you can kind of get your scanning tools to identify all the problems and then rely on an agent and a model to provide the fixes.
Yeah. Um, the way that I've been kind of talking to our team at Codacy is the advent of AI is removing friction from the process of developing software at an incredible, unseen way. We've never seen this pace of friction removal before. We've seen, obviously, uh, ladder climbing in terms of optimization and of abstraction layers, right? Because we're becoming more and more expressive over the during the last few decades in writing software. But this now feels like a huge quantum leap in terms of just friction that we have, and that is tolerable. So, for example, here in our product, what we're seeing is our product remains a gate for many customers. They rely on it. Every single line of code that is shipped, they require our product to make sure that the standards they define from a quality and security perspective are enforced. And that's a hugely important piece of responsibility, and that remains very relevant, especially now in this world. In this world, but one thing that is true is the deterministic layer comes with certain side effects or certain consequences that are not as um, they're not as valid today. For example, when you're dealing with static code analysis, one of the things that is just part of how static analysis works, that those deterministic rules, is sometimes you have some false positives. Sometimes you have some issues that are marked as true when they are really not. And that is something that people are steadily and quickly losing patience. They don't want to be seeing false positives because AI might give you some hallucination, but it's better at finding some of these issues. And so at the same time, AI is not just the full-on silver bullet to every single problem of quality and security. In fact, its non-deterministic nature doesn't really allow you to enforce a consistent standard, because it can decide to tell you that, well, in this particular execution or run, this is what I'm going to look for, and then in an hour or tomorrow, I'm going to look for some other stuff. And so, what we believe in Codacy is a cyborg approach, in which you need the deterministic rules as your backbone, and then you need AI on top of it to make sure that it leverages all the code analysis mechanisms to do the best possible analysis. And that's why for us, we see this as a large opportunity for us, and that our customers really are connecting. We have customers that are actually working on their own AI agents, developing their own AI agents, and they're using our API to be the backbone of code analysis for them to have better code review. So yeah, it's an astounding moment that we're seeing, um, because i- i- people have this expectation that now things seem need to be much more seamless, but at the same time, they don't want the consequence of everything being too seamless. So question for us is what is a good type of friction, you know?
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned there the non-determinism, and off on my right-hand monitor, which the people listening, we normally do video just for short forms. People listening can't see the direction I'm looking in, but I've got a conversation open with some security folks who are kind of new to agentic coding and are asking, we would like to enforce certain steps, and I'm like, it doesn't really work like that. You can ask the model nicely, to look for something, but whether it will actually, engage and activate MCP tools is another matter. So that's presumably that there's still a place for gates and ordered, predefined checks and things like that, and things like CI/CD pipelines.
It's more than there's a place. It's actually one of the features that are now being introduced in all the major harnesses of AI models. So if you look at Claude Code, they have hooks after the model executed. If you look at all these different IDEs from Cursor to Visual Studio Code, they all have plugins in order to i- i- inter, i- inter introduce essentially deterministic moment when AI executes. Just leveraging an MCPs alone requires the AI model to, want to call those things out at those particular moments. And so that's not enough. And so more than just a nice to have is actually what everyone is building is these moments in time where the model is forced to call it to execute. And that's actually what we've been building at Codacy is the ability for some of these models to operate in a deterministic way with our capabilities. Because obviously we've been last decade collecting lots of tools that can run, but also ways of configuring different verticals of security analysis from DAST to secret detection, all these things that can now be at the power and discretion of AI.
It's but before we started recording, we were talking about kind of product pitches and things like that. I'm now going to like name drop something I've been working on called Assembly Line, which is leveraging those hooks that you were talking about. And the idea is it's just a little open source repo, entirely written by Claude. I haven't written any of the code myself, haven't read any of the code, but I've been really kind of strict about spec driving it and making sure there are good acceptance tests. With this thing, the idea is that you define a certain sequence of prompts whenever you or Claude commit, it then goes and runs these jobs, kind of like a local CI pipeline. And it will automatically contribute, fix commits, and then rebase on your main branch. And that you talk about on the I say you the Codacy talk about shifting left in the marketing material, and it will be interesting to see what the kind of future of CI/CD is. How much of this stuff is going to be happening on developers' workstations, where you want and can have that much faster feedback. Um, and you've got some tools there that are kind of local, right, for developers to make use of as they're writing code, not just kind of post submit running on a CI server somewhere.
Right. Um, when we launched, I think we're one of the first companies to actually launch an MCP server that enabled code analysis, and then we did that in April last year when MCP was cool. And some of the things that we really some of the things that we learned were that deterministic layer was incredibly important. But one of the things that we played with was the concept of uh, the leftmost part of the equation, even left left side of that, right? So AI maybe it's on the left side of the developer because the tool that they use that developers can use to actually produce software. Um, I I don't know what will happen to CI/CD. I think that so much has changed over the last quarter. I went from uh, playing with IDs that AI enabled IDs like Cursor and seeing this is obviously the future, looking at CLIs like why would people do that in the terminal, to start using Cloud Code and understanding why that's valuable, but still looking at the pricing of Cloud Code and seeing who the hell would pay for a max plan, who the hell would pay, 90 euros or whatever dollars or whatever for all these tokens. No one's really going to use that, to looking at it today and saying this is obviously a steal. This is a really good deal because you can get it in parallel and do a lot of bunch of work. Of course, you know, if you're not doing it well, I was talking to Dax from Open Code, and he was saying, well, sometimes people use all this parallelization as a proxy for productivity, and then they just throw all these lines of code away, and just wasted time and burned a small forest doing so. But what we what I think, and that's why it's so hard for me to bet, is I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with CI/CD. If history holds any value for us to try to predict the future, is I think more of it will run in developers' workflow. I think more will be asked, or uh, more pressure, more responsibility will be put on developers, because that's really what we're doing today. Is we have fewer doing more, and so I think CI/CD still has obviously a very important place. We certainly think so at Codacy, because that's one of the things that we also sell. Really, is having that central moment where whatever happens in all these local environments, working with all these agents, we have one moment where things need to be right before it goes to production, and that still is, you know, the a very important moment before things go eerie and go badly. And so I think I like to think that all the lessons and learnings and true engineering that was made in the last decades of software engineering still hold true. I truly think so. All the best practices, whether those are built by AI agents or processes that we build to protect against the dangers of AI agents, I think those will be important. I don't know which though. I just think this all changing so much and so quickly and accelerating in an accelerated pace that it's really hard to predict what will
Yeah.
happen there.
Yeah, it is moving extremely quickly, and it's extremely challenging to keep up with. And this is my job to kind of try and keep up with things. But for folks who are delivering on feature backlogs, who are worried about shipping a product, trying to find the time outside of that to keep on top of everything that's changing is a massive burden, and quite a challenge for a lot of people. It's interesting you mentioned about kind of fundamental principles, and I'm inclined to agree. Like what we seem to be finding again and again is that good practice still applies for agents. And if anything, it's kind of slightly distressing that lots of things that maybe the not greatest engineering managers in the world were kind of like overlooking and not caring about too much, like things like test coverage and alignment
Mhm.
on coding standards. Now that agents are involved, so well, we've got to have good test coverage, otherwise our agents won't be able to tell if they've broken something, and we've got to have a good understanding of what good looks like in our code, because otherwise the agents won't be able to write good code. And it's kind of like, these things have been important since forever, and when it was humans, you didn't care so much. But now it's agents. It's trendy to care about.
Right. The 100%. I think now more than ever, testing and 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 as much as you can do in terms of testing will be the way in which we will be able to prove that AI agents did what we wanted them to do. Particularly when we connect things like specs and then acceptance testing and all those very nice things that now kind of measure the outcome of things working or not. I think there's an interesting piece there though, which is um, we're introducing AI agents to code, AI agents before that to almost help us write those specs, AI agents to test, AI agents to then do also some acceptance testing, AI agents to merge, AI agents to review code from others. So it, the point is, if we just put all of AI doing all these different jobs, where how do we enforce checks and balances all of this? So if we get AI agents to write the tests and then them enforcing also the coverage of unit tests, okay, maybe you can get a different model to do different things. That will actually not be a bad idea. But the point is also there needs to be a human element, a human in the loop in some of these processes. That's why for me it's so fascinating to think what is a good type of friction in these processes. What is something that should pause us for a second and say, "Hey, we've been going so fast, but uh, please, take a look at this digest of the last three reviews just to make sure that you're aware of what's happening now." And I think that's where everyone wants to go super fast. That's decided. No one's gonna pause or stop. No one's gonna stop the train.
Yeah,
But eventually, we have to discuss a little bit what that means, right?
yeah, and the one of the things that seems to be happening in a lot of organizations that adopt agentic coding and do start going faster with the engineering is that they rapidly uncover all the other bottlenecks in their development process. One of which commonly is product. Trying to figure out what exactly was it that we were supposed to be building. Either run out of well-defined stories, or it becomes clear that they weren't that well defined in the first place. And I suppose a slightly worrying thing is if people are struggling to define what functionality they want, are they also going to develop a kind of increased blind spot for non-functional requirements? I mean, if folks can't specify the features that they want very well, like how are they going to specify how secure they need their code to be, or the quality of it?
Yeah. I I have a more I have a contrary take to that challenge. Obviously, the take being that software development is hard, and the producing the code was never the bottleneck, right? And I completely subscribe to that. But I also think that as I've been seeing, AI can also help you unblock some of the thinking to build the prototypes that leads you to have the conversation that gets you the right data point to build the right thing afterwards, right? And many times the lack of clarity comes from lack of information. Either we need to come to have a conversation with the customer to truly understand the the requirements or what they need. With AI, we could we can jumpstart a little bit more. We can jump farther ahead into that conversation, at the very least showing prototypes to get the conversation started. The cost of starting something is reduced to reduced much. I don't like saying reduced to zero, but reduced to a much lower factor. And so w- I I also see, and this is something that I experience, is that AI makes some actually interesting decisions when you ask it to do some good research, right? So when you use Claude Code, you can ask it to say, "Hey, please go and research for as much time as you can this particular problem, build a market research documents because I'm going to look at this particular problem." Okay, so now you have that. Actually, I want to fine tune this particular problem and build a spec for a solution. Okay, now I want you to do a red team document to see why is this problem not really real, and test your own assumptions, right? And so as you build this knowledge with AI, you actually learning also, and you can jumpstart much of those things. But I believe this is something that I believe truly is action brings information. So the more you move, the more you do things in a company, the more you're going to get closer to the right solution or the right moment or the right milestone. And I think AI can be an asset to that. So it's more about for me. It's less about lines of code were never the block, right? But it's also AI can help you in the previous parts also of research.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the speed with which prototypes can be created now means that you can realize that maybe you didn't know exactly what you wanted, or that what you thought you wanted wasn't the right thing. Or when you have like vague specs and an agent fills in the blanks, you're like, oh, that was surprising. I didn't think of that, but maybe that's interesting. On the subject of prototypes and the rapidity, I don't know whether rapidity is a word, with the speed with which they can be created. Are you seeing much demand from folks who have got the non-developers creating all the lovable prototypes? Because in a couple of organizations that I'm working with, tools like Lovable and even Claude Code have been given to air quotes non-technical people, like non-software developers, a few of them have really got bitten by the bug and are now cranking out all sorts of tactical software solutions to business problems. And folks trying to keep up with that, it's a bit of a challenge because they don't necessarily have CI/CD pipelines. They don't necessarily have a platform for these kind of apps to live in. But all of a sudden, there are all these GitHub repos popping up that are coming from like the CFO and the head of marketing.
So in our business, we don't interact much with people that are not technical because obviously our product is very much technically and designed for a world where technical um, folks lead the whole development. But I do have many friends that have caught the bug and that are trying and in certain cases even succeeding in producing these prototypes. Um, I think that's where the engineering for me is interesting because the engineering piece doesn't really is not really removed from how we produce software because even working with Lovable, you can get the best prompt possible to start something, but it will give you, a nice looking scaffold boilerplate done for a product with some really good assumptions of what you probably wanted in some cases, right? But as you think about it, an engineer look at that and say, and starts thinking, okay, got it. Okay, so this is actually a good start. I'm gonna plan out to look at this. So it's gonna start. They're gonna start breaking down in pieces like a tree. What all the work they were probably gonna do to launch that product, right? A non-technical person that hasn't gone through the engineering school of life um, doesn't, or at least how I've been experiencing, they don't work in abstraction layers. So they get very, close to details, then they get obsessed about a particular detail that Lovable implemented. And so like I really want that detail to be as correct as possible. And they spend all these credits there. And so I think um what I'm trying to get, I think the promise of having someone do something more complicated than landing pages or the inner tool, intra company tool. I still don't think we're there. We're much closer than we were when we had low code and no code and all that wave of software. But I still think there's so much more engineering practice. Um, it's for example, people that really like producing products but found it unreasonable because you had to maintain and do all this yak shaving. I put myself there in that category. Now they're having a lot of fun, coding with things like Level, but also Claude Code and so forth. I think um, non-technical people are now getting into it, but as I think we're still going to need a bit more hand holding and more context windows and more, you know, better models to help them. That's what I think.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, you mentioned kind of people that want to build things but are put off by the friction. I mean, I certainly had that experience of like over the last few years. There's definitely been things so like I wanted it to exist, but then you end up at your terminal. You're like, oh god, I've got to like figure out how to do dependency management in whichever language it is, and I've got to set up the thing, and then there's a clash of versions. You were a software developer when you started Codacy, right? Do you still consider yourself a software developer? And have you had that a lot of kind of tech leaders that I speak to have had in the last year or so a moment where like, oh wow, I can make all the things, I can be super productive, I can like enjoy programming again. Is that a journey that you've been on personally?
Yeah, I would. I don't know if I like to think of myself as a software developer, um, because I truly like software. I started the company, and the things that when I started the company, parts of of the backend were written by me. I don't think that code exists anymore. And some of the things that I really enjoy in the very beginning were just marveling at small pieces of code. Like when you looked at, a function that was so smart and so intelligent and how it did so much with little, so expressive, and just, looking at, marveling for a second at that and how smart that is. And I remember that um, in the beginning of my career, just spending time out of college, just looking at code. I don't think that happens anymore. And so I think today with Claude Code, I am absolutely amazed and happy because the things that I really enjoy doing are looking at product. I love seeing product being, coming from zero to one. I love seeing features being born, creativity being fulfilled in materializing creativity. That's something that drives me a lot. I love that. And so I've built so many different prototypes for different things, some of which died immediately and just had a use case of an hour. Others that now we use internally in Codacy because I got to play for it during the weekend and I built a tool to canonize code and do a particular type of analysis using Cloud Code. So um, I don't think even the question is if I'm good or bad at that. I think the point now is, can I control an agent well enough so that it covers all the bases required for the software to be good? That's I think what the job is am I controlling it well enough? Am I being an agent herder good enough, an orchestrator of agents? Is that, am I paying attention to all these different facets? And so that's where the game is now. And it's so fun. It's so it feels like and wrote about this. It feels almost like loot boxes. It's less about code and loot
Yes.
boxes. Let's go good software. And it's not good. Oh, you know?
Yeah. It's that random interval thing of like, you're not always getting a pleasant surprise. Sometimes you're disappointed. Oh, I'll give it another go, and it's a real rabbit hole that people get stuck in of
Mhm.
just like prompting and re-prompting when maybe they should, do a rebase, throw away a few commits, and start again. Um, Codacy as an organization, like you've got an advantage, right? In that you are kind of your own customers. Like you understand the end customer and their needs because you're also writing code. Like you're writing software systems, and your consumers are writing software systems. How has it been, if you're able to speak about that, as an organization, kind of facing similar challenges to your customers and adopting agentic coding across the organization internally?
So I think pretty much like any other organization out there, we're going through a transition in which we have a cohort of folks that are extremely excited about AI. Some folks are just getting into it, and some folks that maybe don't believe in the true value of it, and they've seen AI produce software that is not good, and that until very recently was just a reality. If you're using AI coding agents a year ago, you didn't have great results. In the last 2 quarters, things changed dramatically, and with models like Opus 4.5 and 6 and GPT 5.2 and 3, things are dramatically stronger now. And so I think, like any organization, we're going through a transition where some folks are already developing for the same developers that are also excited about AI, and some folks are adapting and learning these tools to use ourselves, to integrate, and then to take to customers. I think we're maybe a bit farther ahead than some other industries, but I am very paranoid about that because what I see also is our customers are trying to enforce, they're trying to make sure that AI is being used so that it's like, fire was invented, it is being given to everyone at the same time. You cannot ignore it, right? It's not going to be a silver bullet, and that's what I think most people fear, that optic of those optics of this being seen as a silver bullet by management when it's not. Like you said, and many people, uh, and it's true. Many times the biggest bottleneck is actually not producing software; is understanding exactly what we need to build. And so that is an important understanding. But I do think that all the tools need to be, these tools need to be adopted. There's no way. There's no way to do it. Like we have to adopt these. We have to use Cloud Code and Codex and all these tools because they're really really good. And in our case, it's existential because our customers are doing so, and so that make like what is code review and code quality and enforcing of standards in a world where AI is writing that code. What is, how do we enable people to review 10,000 lines of code in a pull request. What is how do we help them? And only by using those tools is we effectively learn how to help them. And so that's a big push. M- myself and leadership have been trying to help people use AI because it puts us, inside the shoes of our customers, which is very important.
You mentioned, or you used the word existential there. It's kind of concerning in one way that software is becoming less of a defensive moat. Like in the
Mhm.
past, you could say like, "Oh well, we've invested years and years into building this software product, and it will take anyone else years to catch up." And that seems to be evaporating for a lot of organizations. As the CEO of a software company, is this something that keeps you up at night? Are you kind of re what's the word? Doubling down on the kind of non-software elements because I think a lot of software developers are suddenly coming to the realization that actually running a business that's successful is a lot harder than just having some good software and a good idea. Like all of these developers, like, oh, I've got this great idea for a business, and like, oh, but I don't have time to make it. Well, now you can make it over a weekend with Claude Code, and then you get the crushing realization of, oh, sales and marketing is really hard, and like relationship management's really important. So, are you finding those kind of balances shifting? Do you worry about the fact that somebody with Claude Code can try re-implementing your software over the weekend?
Um, so in our case, it's not in our particular case, it's not someone rewriting our software over the weekend, but is actually understanding what is the space and place of static analysis in the future. As I mentioned before, the idea of any false positive will have a much lower tolerance for a user because the alternative is using AI. And so this has been compelling us to develop a number of features that enable that, you know, removal of friction and improve dramatically the experience. For our case, even is when you have Claude Code doing security analysis, what does that mean to us? Those are fundamental questions that we've been having. And so one thing that we've learned throughout these years is that Codacy as a company exists in the intersection of these organizations. We exist because it's hard to actually produce software and produce something with quality and security. And no matter if you have, uh, you know, 10,000 developers or five brilliant ones producing, or just all the Cloud Codes agents of the world producing software, you're still going to have to comply by the same things. You need to have standards of quality and security that you conform to it. Many of these companies also have actual compliance processes and mechanisms they need to abide by. And so, because of that, that's always been our space. When you want, it's not about reading code, but it's also is making sure that code and software really complies to all these different mechanisms that we have outside of it, so that organizations can move safely. um, at the very like the way that I many times pitch our team is we are builders of trust. People build software, they write all these lines of code. Now AI writes, thousands of lines of code in each pull request. But how do we trust that? And that's really what we've been doing over the last decade is enabling software produced either by AI or humans to be trustworthy. So that when you deploy it, you believe that it won't have vulnerabilities, that won't just, put you to shame on Twitter because someone found a role level security, whatever, problem in your database. There's no issues, a high quality of software so you can continue maintaining it. It's really about that trust element. And I think now more than ever, the intersection of these different processes, people, tools inside companies is not something that is easily replaced. I think there's also a mirage. I think people like the idea of I give go and I recorded a screen my screen. I did a video of me looking at Salesforce, and now I give it to Claude Code, and now I have a CRM. No, you don't. You have a mock-up. You have Salesforce is a collection of thousands of different plugins that integrate. Sure, you can have a small CRM at scale that maybe is useful, but you're not really replacing the connection between software and people. That's really what this is about. We exist because we have organizations with, let's say, 5,000 developers. Some of our customers have many that rely on software and the reports of Codacy to do their job. So that is more than just not, reproducible immediately. Everything is obviously replaceable. It's more than that for me is, um, how do we exist in a world where AI is going to get into every single corner? And that's not the fear that I have. Um, yeah, that's
Yeah.
I want to better focus on that world of having larger and larger software that we have to review, maintain, and ship, I guess.
Yeah, and the trust issue is really important there. If somebody can kind of create some new thing vibe coded over the weekend, but is anyone going to trust it in the same way that they trust a company with a long track record? In terms of humans in the loop, and the kind of emerging field of software factories, kind of becoming a bit of an in joke that every episode I record, I now talk about software factories. But we're seeing things like Stripe's Minions, where they've got
Hmm.
agents being spun up to act on pull requests in isolated environments. And we've got things like, the kind of dark factory pattern of no humans read code or write code. Um, have you got any are you running any experiments in how things like code quality can be ensured in those kind of environments where there is no human in the loop? I guess in some ways, if you've already got software that is reacting to deficiencies and kind of proposing fixes, in a way, you're kind of ahead of where maybe the rest of the industry has been, like due to the nature of the space that you're in. It's kind of like there's the early signs of kind of software factory type behavior in those kind of systems.
Yeah, we have enabled customers to implement not fully, a black box of AI agents working together, but a almost autonomous machine of software where you click and develop and all of that, and they go and implement certain features and Jira tickets and so forth, and they leverage our own code analysis system to give that feedback loop to these agents, so that as part of that process, they make sure to pass some of these gates. So we feel we're part of that already, particularly when the organization starts scaling beyond 150 developers. That's really, really useful. Um, we've been exploring that internally, even for ourselves. How do we get that idea of minions and agents working, and how do we make sure that that has some safety nets and some standards in that process, and how do we make sure that there's some sort of human element reviewing certain um, certain moments in time, either a digest or just kind of stop points or something like that. um, we're exploring. I think that's really important. I think it's an incredibly time it's an incredible time, an incredible opportunity for us right now, because we're seeing a huge pull from companies otherwise, before were not as interested in quality. Now they're being demanded. Um, I think quality and security was always a big point, but now I'm starting to sense that after the AI craze as somewhat maybe paused, or plateau is a hard word, but it's more, after this boom. I am thinking that some folks will get fired because of lack of quality in the software. Whereas before, I don't think this was as true. I don't think this would happen. I think people get fired if you had no security and get breached. That's always a risk. But I think quality is going to become a huge thing also in the future. It's like, well, you vibe coded yourself into a corner, and now how you get out of it. And I think that's a very interesting opportunity now for companies like ourselves, if we continue to move quickly as we have.
Yeah, there's an interesting kind of dynamic when people can be blamed for things. I can imagine some not everybody, but some category of customer or of software development shop being like, oh, well, there was a security vulnerability and it got out. Well, that was because Jimmy made a mistake and Jimmy's the junior, and these kind of things happen. But as we shift to more and more automation, you can imagine a world where people start to look at quality and security more systemically. Of like, well, if you built a software factory that didn't check for these things, that's not Jimmy having a bad day because he was hungover. That was on you for designing a system that didn't assure these things. And we all know that agents don't always do the right thing. So I can imagine a world where folks kind of see those things not as human slips anymore, but as systemic failures in
Mhm.
the software factory they're designing. You mentioned, or we talked earlier about the MCP server that you folks offer. Does using that kind of lead to higher quality, like in the development process, separate from kind of using analysis as a gate, maybe in a CI/CD process? If I'm developing something and I've got the MCP server added to my coding agent, should I expect my agents to make kind of higher quality code? And do you see developers kind of, because it's more immediate and accessible, being able to get that kind of advice and checking done locally? Do you see or anticipate quality going up kind of before checks are made?
Um, so that is the whole thesis of our Codacy MCP server, or essentially our guardrails product that we launched last year, was the ability for a coding agent that is doing a particular task, and when it's done, or kind of before it finishes and returns control to the user, or it's done with the task, it runs an MCP task. And it calls the MCP server from Codacy, runs a number of code analysis locally. So that's really essentially being called by the AI agent, finds issues and then corrects them if the urgency, if the severity is high enough. And so that had really interesting results because we essentially proved that you could have a coding agent operate well, and then at the end, make sure that everything is tidy. You have Anthropic with Claude recently validate a bit that angle by introducing a command. I don't remember the name. I think it's simplify, that also looks after an execution at with the intent of the user. So the user has to call that first. Look at the code quality of software, and make sure that it can find improvements to be made. Um, I think over time, we're exploring now skills to make sure that we can enable the catalog of code analysis capabilities, as well as our big infrastructure of code analysis we've built throughout the last 10 years, to be available for a coding agent to leverage, right? And so some of these things that we're now building are integrations into these new workflows, not necessarily just through the MCP server that we've built, but also through a literal skill that can be called by, Codex or Claude Code. And so that flow, I believe, is the future. Is having an AI agent that can run deterministically in non-deterministic manner, and then leverage tools to give fundament to really give backing to an assessment of quality and security that they can add their own thinking above, but it becomes supported by that deterministic analysis. And that's, I think it's the only way to go, and that's how it works in every single part of the AI agent working. If you wanted to research something, you're going to use a tool, web search. If you wanted to make migrations, going to use a tool to call the database. So if you wanted to make code quality and high security, it's going to have to run a tool also to get more data, just to make sure that you find always the same thing. So that's how we see the world.
We've got a hard stop in 5 minutes because you've got a family commitment. It's the end of the day for both of us. Was there anything else that you particularly wanted to talk about? Anything else that I've not asked you a question about that you wanted to chat over?
Um, no, I think the way that we're seeing this, like there's tremendous excitement in this never in an industry that never sleeps, right? We are the New York of all industries. We never sleep. It's always shipping. It's always new things. You wake up and now there's a new way to do things. And if you live on Twitter, you probably have mental health problems because it just never stops. The scrolling and the new things AI related. Um, what I think is fascinating, particularly for companies like Codacy, but many others, is there's a big opportunity for you to translate or migrate onto help pass technology from all these new innovators, people that are just inventing the future and playing with OpenClaw or CloudBot, whatever the name is this week. And then you want to have that technology translated and moved to larger companies. And I think if there's one sentence that holds true throughout the next few years is you help companies adopt AI the best you can, whether that is in your CRM, whether it is coding, whether that is reviewing, whether it is quality or security, whatever that means. It's adopting AI at scale and do it really well. And if you do that, I think I think every business has a chance to stand on its own. But I that's also how we see the world, and many of the things that we're bringing to market actually in the next few weeks are related to helping companies be even more efficient, more effective, be more compliant, not lose speed. You don't have to trade the insecurity of just, oh, I have all these AI agents doing all this shitty work, and now, apologies, cursing, all this bad work, but now I have Codacy to help me cover my bases. And so that's where we stand, and that's how we see the world. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And just to wrap up, if somebody listening to this is kind of in an organization where agentic coding is being adopted and they've got concerns about either security or the incoming torrent of PRs being raised, what kind of general advice would you give to them?
Um, so first thing is, um, you would be happy first of all to talk because we see this at scale, more than 1,000 customers. We see very small, medium, very large organizations with different tech stacks, and so we'd be more than happy to help. Reach out to us, and we'd be happy to have put something in for us to have a conversation. I think the second is talk to some of the engineers that are already playing with some of these tools. you know Listen to them, ask these questions, see what tools are in and what are the problems. Play with those tools as well yourself so you can get a sense of how the world will be. It was very different, for example, for me to start using and playing with Claude Code, to understand the implications of this for software development. And I think they're massive and exciting, but you need to get your hands dirty. And so, and then there's a number of folks that are important to follow, um, that I believe can also be very helpful in seeing how the world will shape up. But yeah, it's I asked the same question, or kind of a version of that question, to uh, CTOs, for example, Dana Lawson, CTO of Netlify, and I asked, "How do you stay updated?" And no one really has a good answer to it. So if the people producing the innovations don't have good answers to it, I don't think anyone else should be completely obsessed about being updated hourly. I think everyone's figuring out, and I think it's mostly the most important thing for me is be open to some change. Be open to some change because change is coming to everyone. So that's it. That's what I would say.
Excellent. And we are bang on time. So, Jaime, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time out in your busy schedule to chat. But so, yeah, thank you. And let's wrap up so you can get on with your evening.
Thank you, Daniel, for the invitation. It was great being here. Bye.
Hopefully you enjoyed that and found it interesting. When we were done recording, Jaime and I were chatting, and he did point out that it was me that kept on bringing up Codacy and the services they offer. When you bring people onto the podcast, it's nice to be able to share what they do and help make sure that good things come their way. But that was definitely my doing rather than Jaime coming in as like sort of full hardcore sales trying to push his product. So that was entirely my doing. Either way, I hope you enjoyed that. We would still like feedback on the editing and whether you would rather just have all pauses removed so you can get straight to the most important information without listening to me say and every few seconds, or whether you'd like a more natural, unedited version instead. If you have any feedback, please send it to wavesofinnovation@resync.com. That is re-cinq.com. It'd be great to hear from you. Otherwise, be good to each other, and you'll hear me in the next one.